Hi, this is Julius the Snoof from the Bingel Puppet Troupe. You're watching Jake's Happy Nostalgia Show, the podcast where nostalgia comes alive. Roll it!
Welcome to Jake's Happy Nostalgia Show, the podcast where nostalgia comes alive. Since July of 2021, Jake and his friends have interviewed professionals in the worlds of acting, directing, writing, puppeteering, and many more. Who will they be chatting with in this week's interview? Find out in this Jake's Happy Nostalgia Show episode.
Hey everyone, welcome to this episode of Jake's Happy Nostalgia Show, where the podcast when nostalgia comes alive. Happy here with us today. I'm your host, Jake Deffinbaugh. Mooty, as always, our co-host Chris Bixby and Matt Bingel. How you guys doing?
Doing great. Jake, how are you?
Good.
That's good to hear. I'm doing great. As always, Matt, what do we have for today?
Joining us is a renowned author and the brilliant mind behind the beloved and mischievous Roger Rabbit. With this groundbreaking work, he has shaped the landscape of modern storytelling, blending humor, mystery, and fantasy in a way that transcends the boundaries of imagination. Mr. Gary K. Wolf. Gary, welcome. How you doing?
Hey, thank you very much. That was a really nice introduction. Nice to be here. Actually, at my age, nice to be anywhere. Oh,
Awesome.
Yeah, we've heard that before. So to kick this off, we know who you are, but for those who don't, would you care to introduce yourself a little bit and what you do?
sure. Yeah, I'm Gary K. Wolf. Back in 1980, I sold a novel called Who Censored Roger Rabbit to Walt Disney, and Disney took that movie and used it to create the movie Who Framed Roger Rabbit. I then worked with Disney and Spielberg to produce that movie, which succeeded beyond anyone's wildest dreams, earned me 4 Academy Awards, multiple screenwriting deal with Disney, and I've since written 3 other Toontown novels, Who Plugged Roger Rabbit, in which we standardized on the 4-piece stutter, then Who Whacked Roger Rabbit, and most recently, Jessica Rabbit, Serious Business, serious spelled with an X, which tells the origin story of Jessica, Roger, Toontown, explains where Toons came from, how Toontown came to be. I've done all 4 of those novels. I also do other stuff. I've got a major live action animation movie in production right now. I can't tell you any more about it because the studio hasn't announced it yet, and that's what the studio does. They announce, and I can't do that. But I've also got a 12-episode animated TV series in the works, plus a bunch of other stuff. So, if you just know me from my Roger Rabbit work, great. But I do a whole lot of other stuff too.
Awesome. So what was your background like and how did you grow up?
Well, I grew up in a small farm town in Illinois called Earlville. There was 1,400 people. In my entire school, there were 100 kids. There were 25 kids in my class, and I was kind of lucky in a lot of ways because I had really good parents who kind of encouraged me. And I'll give you an example of that. When I was in the I don't know, 2nd or 3rd grade, I can't remember exactly which, but in one of those grades, our teacher gave us a picture to color, and the whole object of coloring this picture was to stay inside the lines. That was the only objective, and the picture showed a typical kind of farm scene. There was a farmhouse, there was a barn, there was a fence, there was a meadow, and there was one cow out in the middle of the meadow. So I took it home that night, and nobody was better at staying inside the lines than I was. So I thought, this is going to be a really easy assignment for me. So I colored the meadow green. I colored the fence brown, colored the barn red, colored the farmhouse yellow, because that's the color the farmhouses were around Earlville. And I come to the cow, and the cow all alone out there in the middle of that field. And my mother had always told me that when people were all alone, that they got sad and they got lonely and they got blue. And I said, works for people, must work for cows. So I colored that cow blue. Next day I hand my picture in. The day after that, the teacher hands them all back, all except for mine. And she says to me, Gary, she says, would you come up to the front of the class? And I thought to myself, wow, I stayed inside the lines better than anybody here. So I went up to the front of the class, and my teacher held that picture up over my head. And she said, class, she said, look at this stupid, stupid picture. She said, everybody knows that cows are brown, cows are black, cows are white. Sometimes cows are brown, black, and white, all three. She says, never, ever, ever are cows blue. She says, Gary, don't ever do anything this stupid again. She called my mom, and my mom had to go to school, which was a big deal for my mother. And the teacher told her, she said, I think there's something wrong with Gary. He colored a cow blue. I think he might need psychological help. And so that night, my mother and my dad called me into the living room, and they sat me down, and my mom says to me, she's, Gary, why did you color that cow blue? And I said, well, geez, Ma, it wasn't really me, it was you. I mean, you were the one who told me that when people are by themselves, they get sad, lonely, and they get blue. I figured it works for people, must work for cows. And so my mom said to me, you go outside and play for a while. Your dad and I have to talk about this. So I went outside, and you have to realize that my parents were working people. My mom had to drop out of school in the 8th grade during the Depression to go to work. My dad had to drop out of school in the 3rd grade during the Depression to go to work. So these are not what you would call today well-educated urban liberals. I mean, these were hardscrabble working people, and I really didn't know how this was going to turn out for me. So, after about a half an hour, my mom and my dad called me back in, and my mom said to me, she says, Gary, says, your dad and I talked about this, and we decided that the next time you want to color cow blue, you go ahead and color a cow blue. So she called my teacher and said, hey, it's fine with us. Don't bother him. If he wants to do it, let him do it. And so, that was really the first validation that I ever had of creativity. I've still got that picture hanging in my office up over my desk. And about, 2 weeks later, the teacher gave us another assignment. And this time the assignment was that we had to write a 1-page paper on what we did on our summer vacation. And, the kids wrote, they went to Chicago, they went up to Wisconsin Dells, they stayed home on the farm, whatever. So I wrote my 1-page paper about how I went out in my backyard, and I used string, tin cans, and aluminum foil. And I built a rocket ship, and I went to the moon. And my teacher just passed that paper back and dropped it on my desk and said, well, that must have been a very interesting vacation. And so, from then on, I went ahead and colored a lot of cows blue. The other thing that I owe my parents, especially my mother, when I was growing up, is that she worked in the school cafeteria. She was a cook in the school cafeteria. My father ran the town pool hall, and even back then, that was kind of a sleazy thing to do. But my mother once said to me, she said, Gary, if you want to get out of this town, you don't want to spend the rest of your life here. You don't want to grow up and wind up running your dad's pool hall. She said, the one thing you can do to make that happen is to read, and that will get you out of this town. And so I read constantly. I got a card to the library when I was, 6 years old. And they used to just devour books. But my favorite books are, I mean, what do kids read? I read comic books. I read every comic book I could get my hands on. And, you know, I would go down to the Andy Giles B Street Smoke Shop on Monday morning when the new comic books came in, and I would read all I could before he'd throw me out. And then I'd buy whatever I could afford with my allowance, and then I'd trade those with other kids for other comic books. And I grew up reading comic books. And, you know, my mother never once said to me, you know, don't read those, they'll rot your brain. Never once. I mean, reading was reading. So
Right.
comic books, I'm fine. My other reading material of choice was what my dad read, and because they were all over the house. And my dad read what at the time was called true crime fiction, and these were magazines, you know, standard magazine-sized magazines, but they had stories in them of true crimes, and by true crimes I mean murders. And they would illustrate these stories with sometimes very graphic photos of the murder scene. If you ever saw a movie with Tom Hanks called Road to Perdition, Jude Law played a photographer who would listen in on the police radio scanner, and whenever he heard of a murder, he would go to the murder scene, sometimes get there before the police, and sometimes stage the bodies so they were more photogenic, and he would take pictures of them, and then he would sell them to exactly magazines like this. There was a very famous photographer called Ouija, and that was how he made his living. And that was what my dad read, you know, true crime magazines with pictures of real murders. And I read those, and my mother never, well, she really couldn't say don't read those because my dad read those, but she never criticized me for that. Luckily, I graduated to a better class of crime fiction. I discovered noir mysteries and got into Chandler and Hammett and Spillane and some of the better writers. But that was how I spent my youth. And you know, now parents come to me and they say, geez, you know, my kid only reads comic books or now graphic novels, you know, and what do I have to do to get them to read good literature? Right? You know, my only response to that is, well, didn't hurt me. I mean, when it came time for me to write my novel, well, I've written a lot of novels. I started writing short stories and wrote a lot of short stories. And I started to realize that instead of writing 12 short stories, I could write one novel and probably make more money at it. So I wrote a novel. It was called Killerbowl. It was all about football as played in the distant future, where it was played as a contact, like a MMA wrestling kind of thing with full contact. It was a blood sport. Each team had one hidden sniper who had a rifle with one bullet. They played it with knives and mallets and clubs, and I predicted a lot of things in that book. I predicted the mixed martial arts kinds of events. I predicted the gas crisis. I predicted the cell phone and the internet, all that kind of stuff. And Doubleday bought that book and published it, and it is still my most popular science fiction book. You know, I still get, I don't know, 30, 40 letters a week about Killerbowl. Wow, what a great
Nice.
Killerbowl is. Sold up pretty well, published in 1976. And Doubleday gave me a contract for 3 more books. So the next one was A Generation Removed. The one after that was A Resurrectionist. Both of them were pretty hard science fiction novels. So for my 4th Doubleday book, I wanted to do something totally unusual, totally off the wall, totally outside the envelope. And I wanted to incorporate the 2 loves of my youth growing up in Earlville, which of course were comic books and hard-boiled noir fiction. So I was looking around for a premise for a novel like that. And, I was watching Saturday morning cartoons one Saturday morning,
Right,
for
yeah.
research.
Mhm,
For research, I told my wife, just for research here. And the cartoons were pretty simplistic, but I was taken with the commercials because they had commercials with cartoon characters, Captain Crunch, the Trix Rabbit, Snap, Crackle, and Pop, Tony the Tiger, cartoon characters talking to kids, talking to real kids, and nobody seemed to think that was odd. And I said, what a great idea that would be for a novel. What if you had a world where cartoon characters were real? So I spent a year researching cartoons to see what kind of things cartoons did that would be funny in a real world. And it just took a year researching it, took another year writing it. It took me 2 years. And at the end of the 2 years, I had come up with Who Censored Roger Rabbit. I created Roger because I wanted Roger to be a kind of Disney-esque character. And this was way before my relationship with Disney. I mean, I looked at Disney's characters. Disney did not have a lovable rabbit as a major star. I mean, Warner Brothers had Bugs Bunny, but Disney had nobody. So I wanted to create him as a lovable rabbit character. I named him after my only boy cousin, Roger, Eddie Valiant. I based him on every private eye had ever read: Sam Spade, Mike Hammer, Philip Marlowe. I named him Eddie after my dad. My dad's name was Eddie. Jessica, my proudest creation. Jessica, if you look at Earlville, where I grew up, through some weird anomaly, the boys outnumbered the girls by 35-1. So, good luck getting a date if you were the president of the Checkers Club, right? So Jessica was an amalgam of every woman that I fantasized over when I was a kid. She's Rita Hayworth, she's Betty Grable, she's Veronica Lake, she's Marilyn Monroe, and she's Amelia Lakowicz, who you've probably never heard of, but that was a girl that I always wanted to date when I was from 8th grade through senior in high school. She would never give me the time of day. So that's Jessica. And, I wrote the book. It's clearly the best thing I'd ever written. I mean, it was amazing book. I sent it to Doubleday as the 4th book in my 4-book contract. And for the first time in my writing career, I mean, I'd written tons of short stories and written those novels. For the first time in my writing career, I got to reach. Doubleday rejected my book. And so I called my editor and I said, Sharon, why did you reject this? I mean, this is the best thing I've ever done. And she said, oh yeah, I agree. She said, it was really good. It was funny and just an amazing book. But she said it was so different from anything you've ever written before, and so different from anything anybody's ever written before, that I had to take it to the marketing department and get approval from the marketing department. And they were the ones who rejected it. So I went to the marketing department and I talked to the head of marketing. And Chuck, why did you reject my book? And he said, well, we all read it and we really liked it, but there's no category for it on the bookstore shelves. It's not a regular fiction novel. It's not a children's book. It's not a regular crime novel. We can't sell this book. There's no category for it. There's no space for it on the bookstore shelves. I said, look, Chuck, what would you do if somebody today gave you The Wizard of Oz or Alice in Wonderland or Gulliver's Travels? What would you do with those? And he thought for a minute. And he said, nah, couldn't sell those either. So I went back to my agent And I said, Bill, you know, if I can't sell this book, Who Censored Roger Rabbit, if I can't sell this book, I don't want to be a writer anymore because this is what I want to write. And so he said, oh, don't worry about it. You know, we'll find it a home. It's a great book. We'll find it a home. So he started sending it out to other publishers, other editors at the same publisher. And along the route, it got 110 rejects. 110 different editors and publishers rejected that book. My wife used to call my trip out to the mailbox every morning the daily disappointments, because I'd go out to the mailbox and come back with, you know, 1, 2, 3, sometimes 10 rejects. And so finally, the 111th submission, it went to St. Martin's Press, which was a small press, and it landed on the desk of a woman named Rebecca Martin. And Rebecca had just published a major bestseller for St. Martin's Press. And so the president of the company gave her a vanity project. He said, look, you know, the next book you can publish whatever you want. Any book you want to publish, we'll publish it. And about that time, Roger Rabbit came across her desk and she loved it. Every editor who read it loved it. It was always the marketing department who said, we can't sell this book. So Rebecca read it, loved it, and took it to the president of St. Martin's. She said, this is the book I want to publish.
Nice.
And so the president said, all right, I'm going to take it home tonight. I'm going to read it and I'll let you know in the morning. So he took it home that night, came back in the morning, called Rebecca in and said, look, you know, I told you I could publish any book you wanted, but you can't publish this because I can't sell it. And so Rebecca stepped up to the plate and said, look, you told me I could publish any book I wanted, either publish that or I quit. And by golly, they published it, albeit in very, very small quantities. I think they published 5,000 copies, which is next to nothing. And you know, people ask me if I could relive my life, if I could go back in a time machine and do something different, what would I do? And I always say that I would go back and I would go back to 1981 when that book came out, because that book sold for $2.99. And today, if you can find that book on eBay, it's well north of $500. So I would go back in a time machine and I would have bought them all, and I would put them in a barn somewhere, and then I'd bring them out today and be a very, very wealthy man. But it did come out, and you know, it came out in 1981, but I sold it in 1980. It took a year for it to come out. And in that year, it was mid 1980, I got a call at home on my home phone. And I answered it, and the guy on the other end of the line says, "This is Gary K. Wolf." I said, yeah, it is. She says, "This is Roy Disney from the Walt Disney Company." I said, right, Walt Disney calling me at home on my home phone. That's rich. And I said, I thought it was one of my friends, you know, having me off. And he said, no, it's really Roy Disney. He says, I just read your book and I wondered if you'd be interested in letting the Walt Disney Company make a movie of it. And yeah, right. The book hasn't even come out yet. How'd you get a copy of my book? Well, it turns out somebody at St. Martin's Press, and I never found out who. I tried and tried because I wanted to kiss her or him full on the lips for doing this, but somebody sent a copy of the manuscript to the Walt Disney Company. Said, "Hey, we're publishing this and we think you'd like it." And it made its way up to Roy Disney, and Roy Disney said, "Yeah, you know, we would like this." And so Roy Disney said, "Well," he said, if you're willing, we'd like to make this into a movie." And they offered me more money than I had made for everything I'd ever written before that put together. And so, you know, I said, of course. Well, I don't know if you've read the book. You should read the book. Everybody should read the book. But the book I thought was unfilmable. And I thought it was unfilmable in a realistic way. I didn't think that you could do it creatively and really do it well, because first of all, you had the whole cartoon character and human being interaction. You had that whole thing. I had used some conventions in the book. For instance, in the book, the characters are characters who appear in comic strips and comic books, and they're photographs, and they talk. They don't actually speak in vocal words. They speak in word balloons. So if you want to talk to a toon, you have to read him, and his word balloon comes up and you read him. And if he turns around, then his word balloon turns around. And so you either have to learn to read backwards or go on the other side of him. And, when somebody shot with a tuned gun, it produces a bang balloon. And that bang balloon, you can pick it up. They're very brittle, so you have to be careful when you pick it up, because they can break very easily. But if you pick it up and preserve it, then if you find another tuned gun, you can produce another bang balloon. And if the two bang balloons match, that's the gun that committed the murder. When somebody plays the piano notes go drifting off, and you can collect those rolls of piano notes and cut them into 8x10 sheets, and that's where sheet music comes from. I had all kinds of stuff like that in the book that I thought made it an unfilmable book. But if Disney was willing to give me that much money to try, I said, sure, go ahead and try. So, for the first couple of years, they pretty much proved me right. They really did not have the clout or the expertise to do this. They tried combining live action and animation, but admittedly, in 1981, 82, 83, the technology was not there yet, and they could not do it realistically. They could barely do it at all. And so in 83 or 84, Disney came to me and said, look, we're not having any luck doing this as a live action animated movie. So what would you say if we did it with the cartoon characters wearing costumes like they do at Disneyland? And I'm thinking, oh, geez, I'm going to have a movie with the stock Disney characters. I'm going to have Fred McMurray playing Eddie Valiant, and I'm going to have Haley Mills playing Jessica, Dean Jones as the rabbit, and Kurt Russell as Baby Herman. I said, don't you think that compromises the principle just a little bit? And they said, yeah, you're probably right. So they went ahead and they were spinning their wheels. And I kind of expected they would spin their wheels, that the project would never get done. Then in 1985, Michael Eisner came on board.
Oh, wow.
And he brought with him Jeff Katzenberg, and the two of them had worked together at 20th Century Fox. And they had a pretty successful track record, and they did something for Roger Rabbit that nobody at Disney had ever done for any Disney movie before. They brought in an outside producer, and that outside producer was a little known guy named Steven Spielberg. And so Steve Spielberg comes to work on my movie, and when Spielberg comes to work on a movie, things get done.
Yeah.
As an example, back in 82 or 83, Roy Disney went to Warner Brothers, and he said, look, we're doing this live action animated movie, and we'd like to have Bugs Bunny in the movie. Just Bugs Bunny comes out, he says, what's up, Doc? And munches a carrot and walks off. What do you think? And Warner Brothers says, get lost. There's no way Bugs Bunny is ever going to be in a Walt Disney movie. That is just never going to happen. So in 1986, Steve Spielberg goes into Warner Brothers and makes the identical request. We're making a live action animated movie. Can we have Bugs Bunny? And to Steve Spielberg, Warner Brothers says, of course, take Bugs. What about Porky Pig? Don't you want him too? Or what about Wile E. Coyote and the Roadrunner, and Yosemite Sam and Tweety Bird and Sylvester the Cat? Take them all. And so we got all of the Warner Brothers characters, and the only requirement was that Bugs, being a bona fide cartoon superstar, had a contract, and in his contract it specified that he had to be in every scene with Mickey Mouse. You could not have Mickey Mouse on screen without having Bug with him, because they were co-equal superstars. And so Bugs and Mickey had to be in every scene together. So when you see, and the other thing, they have to have the same number of words of dialogue. So when you see the scene of them parachuting
Oh yeah.
down with Eddie Valiant, with Bob Hoskins between them, they have exactly the same amount of screen time and exactly the same amount of words of dialogue.
Oh,
Yeah, that is something I just found this out just very recently. I didn't know this, but one of the other requirements that Disney put on the Disney animators was that they had to use the Warner Brothers characters from 1986, which are considerably different from the Warner Brothers characters in 1946 when the movie was filmed. If you look at the two, Bugs Bunny looks very, very different in 1946 than he does now. So does Porky Pigs. They all do. But Warner's was pretty adamant about wanting to use the modern characters, not the old ones. The Disney animators were just as adamant about using the old ones. So no, we have to use the old ones. So what they did was to do two versions of all the Warner Brothers characters. They animated the scenes with the new characters and with the old characters, both. They showed the scenes with the new characters to Warner Brothers, and they put the scenes with the old characters in the movie. And Warner Brothers was not aware of this until the movie came out. And when the Warner's execs saw that movie and realized that that was the 1946 Bugs, not the 1986 Bugs, they went nuts. But because the movie was such a phenomenal success, highest grossing movie of the year, they started to realize that this opened up a new revenue stream for them, and they started selling T-shirts with the old characters and the new characters. So it had a good ending. But to show you how the animators felt about Warner Brothers, they hated Warner Brothers because Warner Brothers was constantly making these unreasonable demands on them. And so in that scene, when Roger and Bugs are parachuting to Earth, they wanted Mickey to give Bugs the finger on the way down. Okay. Now, this is done as what they call a gag in the margin. If you if you're aware of how film works, film goes through a camera 24 frames a second. Animators learned in the early days of animation that they could screw around with 6 of those frames, or cells, as they call them. The human eye couldn't see, so they put these little jokes in the movie, and they wanted to put as a gag in the margin Mickey giving Bugs the finger, and this would only be visible to the projectionist who was projecting the movie in a movie theater. Nobody else could see it. Too fast for the human eye. So they were going to do this, and the movie was being animated in London by Dick Williams, who was the lead animator. And Dick had assembled a group of kind of mini United Nations top drawer animators, a lot of animators who came over from the former Iron Curtain countries, a lot of animators who came up from South America. And it was a real Tower of Babel, because very few of these people spoke English. So in order to speak to the Russian guy, you had to speak to the Greek guy, who would speak to the French guy, who would speak to the Spanish guy, who would speak to the Russian guy, and then we'll come back. So they, I think it was an Estonian guy, I'm not sure who was given the assignment to do the scene with Mickey giving Bugs the finger. And so, of course, it went through 3 or 4 different people before it got to him, and then came back. And in the final, if you watch it, and you can now watch it on DVD. You can go frame by frame and you can see it.
Mhm.
He screwed it up, and instead of having Mickey give Bugs the finger, he has Bugs giving Mickey the finger. So entirely the wrong message.
Wow.
Um,
That's funny.
movie came out in
Oh my gosh.
1988, and won 4 Academy Awards. It was the highest grossing movie of the year. Got me a movie deal with Disney, and kind of validated my mother, who told me to keep drawing blue cows.
I know, that's wonderful. And you mentioned the movie being a sensation. That actually brings me to my next question. Did you know that the movie would become such a big sensation that it is now?
Oh no, I not only did I not know, nobody knew. When we were making the movie, the rule of thumb is that a movie for adults can be any length. I mean, there are 3-hour movies for adults.
Oh yeah.
A movie for kids has to be 90 minutes, no more than 90 minutes. Almost every movie that you see that's a kid's movie is 90 minutes.
Right, because kids have short attention
Yeah,
spans.
short attention span. So they filmed the movie, and the movie came in at about 1 hour and 58 minutes. But nobody knew. Nobody. I mean, not the directors, not Disney, not Spielberg, not anybody. Nobody knew who was going to come to see this movie. They didn't know if adults would come to see it or if kids would come to see it or what. So they didn't want to make it that long for fear that if it turned out to be a children's movie, children wouldn't come to see it. So they cut scenes, and they cut it down to 1 hour and 36, I think, or something like that. And some of the scenes they cut are scenes that bits of them remain in the movie and are a little puzzling when you really think about them. There was a scene early in the movie, well, not early, but midway through the movie, when Eddie Valiant goes into Toontown. He goes into Toontown before he goes into Toontown at the end. He goes into Toontown, and he discovers Jessica having a meeting with Judge Doom, and it leads you to believe that Jessica is somehow involved in the murder of Archie Maroon, that she had something to do with that. And then the Judge Doom sees Eddie, grabs him, the weasels tie him up, and they put a pig's head on him. It's a cartoon pig's head. They put a pig's head on him. They take him out of Toontown. They dump him out front of his office, and he goes into his office with this pig head, and he looks in the mirror, and he's got a pig's head on. So he goes into the shower, and he washes the pig's head off. And if you ever saw Psycho with Janet Leigh, the scene is very reminiscent of Janet Leigh in the shower with Psycho. He's washing off the pig's head, and like Janet Leigh's blood in Psycho, the pig's head goes down the drain and circles around down the drain. So Eddie Valiant comes out of the shower and out of his bathroom, and at that point, that everything prior to that was cut. So where the movie now picks up is Eddie Valiant coming out of his bathroom, and he's wearing his tie, but no t-shirt or no shirt, because that's what he had on in the bathroom. And that makes no sense. I mean, why would a guy be coming out of his bathroom wearing a tie with no shirt? And then Jessica comes in and says, "Hey, I'm not bad. I'm just drawn that way." And the comment that she was making was a comment on the fact that he had caught her with Judge Doom and thought that she was bad. And then Dolores comes in and says painting with watercolors. But that scene in context doesn't make any sense. But if you know what was cut, It does.
Right.
The day that the movie premiered, it premiered in just about right now, for June 20th in 1988. And we, of course, I went to the premiere, which Radio City Music Hall in New York City. And
Oh, wow.
yeah, the next day, we had my wife and I were in a hotel room that Disney had given us that overlooked Radio City Music Hall. And I went to the window in the morning. I got up at 7. I went to the window in the morning, and I looked out, and there was a line of people waiting to get in the theater all around the block. And the theater didn't even, they were doing a special showing at 8 o'clock, and the line went all the way around the block to get into an 8 o'clock show, and it was 7 o'clock. And that was our first indication that this was going to be a, pretty big hit. Later that day, I had heard that Macy's had merchandise, and I wanted to, I wanted to check out the merchandise, see what kind of Roger Rabbit merchandise there were. Maybe they'd have a doll or something. And my wife and I went over to Macy's, and which was just down the street from Radio City, and I walked in, and I asked the young woman at the information desk. I said, "Hey, do you have Roger Rabbit merchandise?" And she said, "Yes, we do." And I said, "Well, where is it?" She said, "Second floor." I said, "Where on the second floor?" She says, "No, second floor." So we went up, got off the elevator, and the entire second floor was Roger Rabbit merchandise. As far as I could see, there was Roger Rabbit merchandise. And I had told my wife that I was going to buy. I had told my wife I was going to buy the first piece of Roger merchandise I saw, which happened to be a talking Roger.
That's going great.
Yeah.
How's it still going?
And so I bought this doll.
Yeah.
And I'm carrying this doll around, and I look, and in the next aisle over is Charlie Fleischer, also checking out the Roger Rabbit merchandise. And Charlie Fleischer is the guy that we picked to be the voice of Roger Rabbit. So I went over to Charlie. I said, "Charlie, what do you think of this?" She says, "It's amazing." I said, "Charlie, I just bought this doll with this talking Roger Rabbit doll." She says, "That's my voice. It's my voice. It's my actual voice in that doll." So I said, "Well, would you autograph it for me?" And he said, "Yeah, of course." Well, that was the first piece of merchandise that Charlie Fleischer autographed after the movie came out. So the first piece of merchandise he autographed as actually being Roger Rabbit. And I've still got that too. So
Oh, nice.
Nice.
Awesome.
Really nice.
So I'm kind of curious, do you have any favorite scenes from the movie?
Oh, yeah, so many. I was on the set for most of the filming. I'm a writer. I'm not a movie maker, and movie making is a long, boring, tedious process, and I get bored kind of easily. But the scenes that I recall that I really loved, you probably just go right by them, but because I saw them being filmed, they're dearer to me. And one of them is when Chris Lloyd is trying to put on that rubber glove so that he can grab the red shoe. And Chris Lloyd, God bless him, great actor, funny guy, terrific.
Oh yeah,
but
true legend. Yeah,
he's really Reverend Jim from Taxi. I mean, he's kind of a wild and crazy guy, and he kept putting that rubber glove on, and he was supposed to bring his hand up and snap the glove, and he could not get it right. He would bring it up and snap it, and it would only be like these fingers, or it would only be like this finger, or it would only be like this finger. And he kept trying and trying and trying, and oh God, he must have tried 50, 100 times, and finally, he snapped it. And oh, thank God! And when you see it in the movie, it probably took a half an hour to film that. And when you see it in the movie, it's just boom, And,
Right. Yeah.
to you, that's just a guy putting on a rubber glove. But to me, that was one of the funniest things I ever saw in my life. The other thing at the end is when Bob Hoskins is doing his little kind of carnival routine at the
Oh,
Acme warehouse. Those scenes were all filmed in London. I don't know if that's common knowledge or not, but an Acme warehouse was actually a locomotive repair facility just outside London. And we rented that. And in order to make it was winter. It was in the middle of winter in London. So there was snow on the ground. Well, they melted the snow off with these huge jet engines. But it didn't look like LA. So Steve Spielberg sent a plane to Saudi Arabia and had them bring back 20 palm trees and fully grown palm trees, which they positioned around the outside of the Acme warehouse to make it look like LA. But of course, in the evening, when the temperature went down, they were worried the palm trees were gonna die. So there was a guy whose job it was to every night wrap the palm trees in bubble wrap and make sure that they didn't die. The reason why we filmed in London rather than the United States, Steve Spielberg likes the food in London. Go figure. No, that's it. Yeah, he does love the food in London, but that's not what we filmed there. We needed a 3-story soundstage, and that did not exist in the United States at the time. It does now, but it didn't then. So we went to Elstree Studios where they had such a thing. And the reason we needed a 3-stage studio was because on the top floor was the actual set. On the second floor were the puppeteers who were manipulating the actual objects on the third floor. And these objects were on sticks, and the puppeteers were manipulating them through holes in the floor on the second floor. And then on the ground floor, there were a bank of video cameras. And the director, Bob Zemeckis, who directed the movie, Bob Z was on the first floor. And he was communicating with the actors on the third floor by intercom. And he was looking at a video of what the camera was seeing. And he had animators down there who would draw on the video camera so that he could see the relationship between the live actors and the animated characters. Because remember, those animated characters weren't out there. Everybody was making those up in their minds. So, 3-story. And the one scene that sticks in my mind, the one scene that is, actually 2 scenes that stick in my mind. Brilliant scenes. Both having to do with animation. When Roger, Eddie, and Dolores are in that storeroom in the terminal bar.
Yes, it's a good one.
Eddie, and I think it's Roger who bumps the light, and the light starts swinging back and forth and back and forth. If you look at that scene, the shadows of that light constantly moving. Now remember, we're talking about 24 frames a second of film going through a camera, which means that every 1/24th of a second, you have to do a new drawing to match up with that. So that means that the perspective on Roger is changing and how his shadow is changing. 1/24th of a second, you have to keep doing animated cells to match that up. And it's flawless. I mean, if you look at Roger's shadow, it's moving perfectly with the shade of the light. And animator, that was so spectacular. When animators first saw that, when the movie came out, animators were just blown away by that scene. And they now refer to a scene that's an amazing piece of animation that's bumping the light. That's what they call it. The other scene that just blew me away in the movie was the first scene, the cartoon. because Dick Williams, who was the lead animator, did that entire opening cartoon himself, every single frame. And now remember, again, 24 frames per second, so 24 cells per second. He did things in there that he didn't have to do, things that he did because he wanted to show that this movie was taking animation up not just one notch, but the whole staircase full of notches. If you look at that scene, Roger Rabbit is in a kitchen with a black and white tile floor. Now, there's no reason why that floor has to be black and white in that cartoon. It can be solid black, it can be solid white. But by being black and white tile, every 24th of a second, the perspective on that floor changes. So the tiles, the perspective on the tiles change, and he had to work the perspective on how many tiles, 1/24th of a second. And then to complicate it even further, if you look at that scene, you'll see that Roger's reflection is shown in the tiles. So Roger is reflected in these black and white tiles, and the perspective on that is changing, every 24th of a second. It's an amazing job of animation. Lasts about 3 minutes, and you're going to see it. You're going to laugh. You're going to say, "Wow, that's a really funny gag." Animators look at that, and their jaws drop because that is such an amazing bit of animation. So I think those are my favorite scenes. Yeah. Oh, and I can't ignore Jessica. I mean, when Jessica makes her first appearance, that's just a blow away. And her dress, if you look at her dress sparkles like she's got diamonds on it. They wanted her dress to sparkle throughout the entire movie. But the putting those sparkles on her dress was an incredibly complicated bit of animation. And they finally decided, well, she's just going to wear a red dress for the rest of the movie. And I think that actually was a good decision, because I think having her in a sparkly dress all through the movie would have distracted from what was going on around. But, when Jessica first comes out and walks down that stage, and the interaction she has with the humans around her, that blew me away, and it blew away everybody else. And Jessica was the hardest character for the animators to draw, because they were used to drawing goats and pigs and ducks and barnyard animals, and here they were being asked to draw not just a woman, but kind of the essence of a woman, and they just couldn't seem to get it right. So Bob Zemeckis, the director, went down to the London's South End, where all the strip clubs were, and hired a stripper and brought her back to the studio so that the animators could see how a real woman walked in Jessica's dress. Then they had her do it again wearing just her bra and panties, and then they had her do it again naked, so that the animators could see the movement of the female body as she was doing that walk. And for weeks after, you could go back to the animation department, and you'd hear the guy saying, "Geez, I've been working so hard, I forgot what a woman looks like. Let's watch the Jessica scene again." So those are my favorites.
Nice.
Awesome.
Nice. So in 2013, you proposed a prequel film to Framed Roger Rabbit. Can you kind of talk a bit about that?
Yeah, that kind of came and went. A lot of things happened. They had one set for 1999. The movie came out in 1989. They had one set for about 3 or 4 years later. They had a director, had a script, but it's at some point it's politics. If Roy Disney had stayed at Disney and hadn't been forced out by Michael Eisner, Roger Rabbit probably wouldn't have been done. But Michael Eisner came in, and as a result of Michael Eisner, the movie got made. And Steve Spielberg, But the relationship between Spielberg and Disney kind of soured in the early 90s. And Spielberg went off and did his own thing with Amblin and didn't want to have much to do with Disney. And he's the producer of all the Roger Rabbit projects. So if Spielberg isn't producing the Roger Rabbit projects, there are no Roger Rabbit projects. That kind of ebbed and flowed. And, in 2013, they kind of repaired the rift, and we're going to do it again. And then Pixar got involved, and now Pixar seems to only want to do Pixar projects with Pixar characters.
Yeah.
They don't really seem that interested in any of the classic Disney characters, not Roger certainly, but not even Mickey Mouse or Donald Duck or
Right.
any of the classics. They just want to do
Mhm.
Do
their
stuff
own-
that's in their circle. Yeah.
yeah, they just want to do their own characters. So, my sense of it, Roger Rabbit was the most successful movie of the year when it came out. In Hollywood, money triumphs all. And my guess is that sooner or later, Disney's going to take a look at their projects. I mean, they're remaking 101 Dalmatians, for God's sake.
I know. Yeah. They've
Little
remade so
Army.
many movies.
There is going to come a time when Disney's going to say, we can get a quick chunk of change here by doing the sequel to Roger Rabbit, and it will happen. When that is, your guess is kind of as good as mine.
Yeah.
Yeah, sounds about right.
So what piece of advice would you give to anyone who wants to get into writing books as a profession?
Well, if you paid attention, I think the prime piece of advice is don't give up. If you believe in what it is you're doing, don't give up. Just keep plugging away, because sooner or later, if you're out there drawing blue cows and people are saying, no, we want we want orchid chameleons, just keep drawing your blue cow, and sooner or later somebody's going to say, oh, blue cows, yeah, just what I've been looking for. You have to believe in yourself. That's
Oh yeah.
That's
Absolutely.
the primary thing. You have to believe in yourself. So believe that what you're doing is right. Believe that what you're doing is important. And I have never ever in my entire life as a writer, I've never written for money. I don't do that. And in fact, truth be told, I don't write for other people. I write to amuse myself. I write things that make me laugh. I write things that I think are funny. I write things that I think are clever. I'm kind of fortunate that other people seem to agree. Part of the problem that I have is a guy who is of a generation. A lot of the references that I use nowadays, young people just don't get. I mean, they don't know references to movies that I sometimes throw into my books. They don't know references to singers or band leaders or songs that I throw into my books. But again, I write to amuse myself, and I'm not going to change because people don't know what this movie that I'm talking about. They don't know what that is. That's what Google's for,
Yeah.
Go
Mhm.
Google it. I'm not going to change for my audience. I'm going to make myself happy, and luckily become a success doing that.
Nice.
Awesome.
Nice. So now, to any Roger Rabbit fan or any fan of your work in general, what would you like to say to those who have supported your work?
Oh, I mean, I'm gonna be known forever as the guy who created Roger Rabbit. And when I die, it will be on my tombstone. He created Roger Rabbit, and that's enough. I am so grateful to the fans who have supported me through the years. I just did a big fan event where I was guest of honor, and I was
Oh wow.
I was overwhelmed
Awesome.
by the people who come up to me. I still get
Oh,
I would say 30 to 40 pictures a week show up on my email of young women who are cosplaying Jessica.
Wow.
What?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
And I got to tell you guys, had I known when I was in high school, back in high school, when I couldn't get a date, that there would come a time when 30 to 40 gorgeous women would be sending me pictures of themselves in a low-cut red dress every week, I would have written that book a whole lot sooner. So, I have a collection of tattoos of my characters on people's body parts, and there are thousands of them. I can't tell you how many people have my autograph tattooed underneath a picture of my character, and I'm overwhelmed by this. I'm so grateful to the fans because they've accepted Roger Rabbit, they've accepted Jessica Rabbit, and they've kept them alive. They've kept them alive. They're still viable characters 35 years after the movie.
Absolutely.
Yes,
Definitely.
that's so wonderful.
Yeah.
And they still have that all these years.
Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So
Yeah.
if people would like to connect with you, where can people find you?
Oh, okay. If you want to read more about me, you want to buy my books, go to www.garywolf.com and you'll read all about me there. You can buy my books. I'm on Facebook. I'm really active on Facebook. I post all the Jessica Rabbit cosplay pictures on Facebook. So if that's of interest to you, friend me there. But you got to friend me pretty soon because I'm coming up to my
Limit.
my limit. So if you want to follow me there, you gotta get there soon. But I'd like to leave you with one movie story that is kind of relevant.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, it is Steve Spielberg was in charge of going out and getting other studios characters, and Steve wanted to make sure that everybody who was involved in this movie in a major way had his or her favorite character in the movie. Bob Zemeckis, the director, his was the Roadrunner Wile E. Coyote. Dick Williams was Droopy. Bob Hoskins was Heckle and Jekyll. And so Steve came to me and he says, what's your favorite movie? What's your favorite cartoon character? So I want to make sure I get it and put it in the movie. And I said, Steve, I got Roger, I got Jessica, I got Baby Herman, I got Benny the Cab. I think I'm covered. He says, well, I want to do something for you. So I'll do something for you. So as I say, now with a DVD, you can go through that movie frame by frame and you can see these gags in the margins, these little 6/24 of a second drawings that are invisible to the naked eye, but you'll be able to see. So if you go to the movie and you watch the scene where Eddie Valiant goes into Toontown, and as he's just going into Toontown and the curtain opens and the birds are singing and it's all light and happiness. And if you freeze frame it there and go through frame by frame, look on your left and you're going to see a red barn, a yellow farmhouse, a green meadow, brown fence, and a blue cow standing all alone in the middle of that field.
Definitely. So the last question that Jake's about to ask is a question that we ask all of our guests at the end of each interview.
Sure.
Yes. So of course, this podcast is called Jake's Happy Nostalgia Show.
Yeah,
Hey, look at that.
Yep.
So when you think of nostalgia, what do you think of, or in your own words, how would you define the word nostalgia?
How would I define nostalgia?
Yeah.
Well, nostalgia is kind of to me, it's a happy place. I go back to the times I was happy and think about what I was doing then, and what was I doing then? Well, I was reading, I was watching black and white programs on television. I was listening to the radio. I was going to the movies and watching black and white or color movies. And to me, nostalgia is happiness. It's my happy time, and it's a place I can go to get away from the troubles and tribulations of the world today.
Absolutely. Great word send
Yes,
off.
absolutely.
Well, Gary, thank you so much for taking the time to do
Oh,
this.
my
This was a
pleasure.
blast.
Yes.
Thanks,
Thank
guys.
you.
I had a good
Yes,
time.
thank you very much. Thank you very much to do this. And thank you so much, for
Yeah, let me know
for
when
you
this
to-
goes live and I'll post it on my Facebook page.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah, of course. And
Sure,
thank you, so
Yeah.
much for what you've done over the years and to be a part of our lives. Keep up your great work and cannot wait for next for you, especially for future books coming your way and all that.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, guys. We'll see
Yeah,
you.
of course.
All right. Enjoy the
Yeah.
rest of your day,
Thank
Gary.
you.
All right, take care, Carrie. See ya.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. It's goodbye from us as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yes, we
Brings another
absolutely
episode.
enjoyed-
Yes, we absolutely enjoyed our time with Gary K. Wolf, but as always, this brings another episode of Jake's Happy Nostalgia Show to a close. And as always, what do we say, Jake?
Keep nostalgia alive. See you next time. More fun episodes coming your way. As always, take care. See ya. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for tuning in to another wonderful Jake's Happy Nostalgia Show interview. Be sure to follow Jake and the crew on social media and stream the show wherever you find your favorite podcasts. And as always, remember to keep nostalgia alive. Bye-bye.